Welcome to the Visiting Writer Series. This is the final event of the semester, so you guys are here on like the last one, which for my students means you squeaked in on the last event as well. Glad to see you all here. My name is Suzanne Parker. I'm the director of the Brookdale Visiting Writer Series. Tonight we have two absolutely wonderful poets who are going to be reading their work for you. Before we get started, there are a few people to thank. First off, without student activities and their incredible support of Robert and Jill, none of this possibly would have happened. Plus, we would not have free biscotti and coffee in the back of the room, so, you know, there you go. And by all means, please eat it to prove that it's important that we have it as well. Thank you as well to the bookstore back in the corner over there. Thank you for being here hours before we were here. Thank you for setting everything up, so thank you. Yay. Plus, the fact that the bookstore is here as well tells you that there are books of our two wonderful poets here that you can buy, and I'm sure they would be happy to sign them for you after the reading. So please, please, please do buy their books. Also, thanks to the Creative Writing Club, who are the people who hit you up for a $3 suggested donation at the door. Also, anyone who is a closet writer, you should come on out to the Creative Writing Club. We meet on Tuesdays at 11:30. 11:45 in Larison 101. Great group of people. We also are doing an open mic next Tuesday in the Student Life Center. So please come on by the Student Life Center, listen to some poetry, listen to some stories, share your stuff, or just come and show your support. Finally, I want to actually announce for the second time that Brookdale now has a new creative writing option. So you can actually have a concentration in creative writing. Classes are going to be in poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction. We're working towards maybe doing a screenwriting class. So please talk to Laura McCullough, who is somewhere here or outside. She's a woman with the adorable children with her. And, or talk to your counselor about it and say you want to know more about the creative writing option. Finally, thank all of you for being here. I was all worried that it was the last reading of the semester and there'd be like, 2 people here. But I'm glad to see there's an audience. We're going to have 2 readers. First, Kurt Brown is going to read, and then he and Laure-Anne are going to read together. And then Laure-Anne Bosselaar will finish up the evening with her reading. So, without further ado, because they're actually going to get up here, usually I introduce one person, and that person gets up and reads, and then the next person, comes up, and I introduce them, and then they read, and then there's questions. But because they are reading together, I'm going to actually kind of introduce them both at the same time. So, if you'll hang with me. First off, Kurt Brown is the author of a huge number of books, actually. The highlights being 6 chapbooks, 5 full-length collections, including Return of the Prodigals, More Things Than Heaven and Earth, Fables from the Ark, and the forthcoming books Future Ship and From Here. He is also the editor of several anthologies, including Drive, They Said, poems about Americans and their cars, Verse and Universe, poems about science and mathematics, and he co-edited Blues for Bill, a tribute to William Matthews, as well as Night Out, poems about hotels, motels, restaurants, and bars, and Conversation Pieces, which just came out, which is really cool. It's a book that has poems that talk to other poems in it and respond to one another. He has also edited a book of essays, The Measured Word, on poetry and science, and was co-translator with Laure-Anne of The Plural of Happiness, the selected works of Herman de Koning. What I love about Kurt's work is the incredible range present in it. With poems that span the subjects of Metamucil and Viagra, to a created persona called Rita, who takes a bomb to lunch, these are poems that investigate, question, demand, and explore. Over the course of his books, Kurt's poems have displayed a great sympathy and a joy, but also a very exacting eye. Kurt sees the world for all its warts, all its rats, for the circus that it is. In the words of Stephen Dunn, his work is a personal search for the authentic. And that search, through myth and today's reality, is one marked by great intelligence, craft, and humor. Kurt's poetry recognizes the complicated, sometimes absurd nature of our existence, and he is generous in his response to it. That's Kurt. Okay. He would usually get up and read now, but I'm going to do Laure-Anne as well. Laure-Anne Bosselaar grew up in Belgium and moved to the United States in 1987. She is the author of 3 collections, A New Hunger, Small Gods of Grief, which won the Isabella Gardner Prize for Poetry, and The Hour Between Dog and Wolf. As an anthologist, she edited Never Before, poems about first experiences, Outsider, poems about rebels, exiles, and renegades, and Urban Nature, poems about wildlife in the city, and along with Kurt Brown, edited Night Out. Most recently, as well, as I said, Laure-Anne and Kurt edited the Belgian poet Koenig's poems. What I find in Laure-Anne's work that is so impressive is the great humanity in her poems. Sometimes this arrives in the people of her poems, poems about soldiers, nuns, farmers, prostitutes, people we rarely get to hear from. But in Laure-Anne's verse, they are allowed a great deal of emotion and a freedom of expression. Sometimes this humanity comes through in poems that explore the weight of loss and the difficulty of love. As the poet and critic Charlie Smith has said, Laure-Anne understands the complexities and the endless contradictions of our contemporary human predicament. And as the poet Stephen Dunn said, she is a writer of urgent meditations. Laure-Anne is a poet who searches through the past and through the world today for new meaning, and who offers them in beautifully crafted poems. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you first Kurt and then Laure-Anne Bosselaar.
Well, first, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Suzanne and Laura, for having us back at Brookdale. We were here, I don't know, a couple of years ago for a writers' conference. It was great. So it's really nice to be back on campus, and for all of you to come out tonight to listen to some poems. So I thought I didn't realize I had this poem with me. This is an unpublished poem. It'll be in some book, but I'm going to read it because I want to prove to you that I can write in rhyme and meter. So if you're listening, you'll actually be able to hear rhyme and meter. And I wrote this poem in rhyme and meter because it's a poem called Dancing Lessons. When I was a kid, you used to go we went to a gym and had dancing lessons and with a bunch of other little boys and girls. And there was a guy there to teach us how to waltz and foxtrot. Because the thing that you learned then was, you're all break dancing now and all that kind of stuff, but we were box stepping, which meant 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the way we learned to dance, just by making a box with our feet. So this is called Dance Lessons. First, the box step, that squaring of the feet, the easiest of dances to acquire. We shuffle left and forward, then right and back, matching movement with desire, dancing to adulthood with each firm step. Boy and girl, girl and boy, face to face, we clutch each other, shrugging off childhood with new sophistication and learned grace. Our practice hall is nothing but a gym, decked out in bright bunting and paper chains. Just yesterday, we sweated here, grunting through calisthenics and intramural games. The girl I whirl around the polished floor giggles uncontrollably in a rush to become a woman, steady girlfriend, wife. But she won't last long. With a lurch, we brush past others, all just as clumsy as us, following the music or trying to. If we fall into step, it's just sheer luck. Nothing we control. Nothing we can do to master the dance, but practice, which our instructor shouts from time to time as we lumber past like dull-eyed tourists or good consumers in a checkout line. Pairing off in that dim place, then pairing off again, we swap partners, already deft at giving one another up, as long as it's graceful and we're not the one left. And when we step on each other's toes, we say, sorry, excusing our innate faults, then go on dancing as though absolved. So we progress to the foxtrot and waltz. Thank you, and I appreciate that. If you'd like to hold your applause till the end, then that would be great. Then you don't have to applaud at the end of every poem, so that if you don't applaud as loudly for one as the other, I'll think, oh, I didn't like that one. You know? So I'll read a couple of poems from this first book. I wanted to start with this poem called "Bombing the Swarm." It took me a long time to write this poem, not because it's such a great poem, just because I couldn't find out a way to write it. It's a poem that began with an image that bothered me from my childhood. That image was, and some of you have seen this, bees swarming in the spring on a branch. You know, masses of bees clustering together, right, and swarming. They almost make a hive in themselves, but there's no hive there, just clinging together. And of course, because I was at summer school with a bunch of other boys, we came along and we threw apples at it, right? And so I don't know why this stayed with me for so long, but I think it was probably because I felt guilty about that. Young boys can tend to do awful things to creatures, not young girls, but young boys do all these awful things. So this is my story about that. It's called "Bombing the Swarm." And one other thing behind this was, I mean, I don't know how old I was. I guess I was probably 8 or 9 years old, but I was aware that some huge event had just taken place that I'd missed. That's the Second World War. And so "Bombing the Swarm" becomes also, that's behind this poem, that I understood that there was a lot of bombing of cities. Bombing the swarm. This swarm of bees was hanging from the branch of a tall tree, a writhing mass that clung together and swung down like a black bell. One of the boys, can't remember who, picked up an apple. It was late August, 51 or 52, and hurled it into the nest. It came apart in hunks, like a skull exploding, then recomposed. But we kept hurling apples, and the swarm kept flying apart, flying together. Replay of a bullet entering a man's brain. Looking back, I realized we couldn't stop. Neither could the bees. We had this frenzy. That's when I learned how dangerous I was. So that now, when I walk in a field, my shadow makes crickets hush, and birds fly away in alarm. So I'm just imagining that nature remembers me and is smart enough to get out of the way when I show up as an adult. Here's a poem called "Money is Water." This poem came about because I was reading an economic article. Why I was reading an economic article, I don't know, but I was reading an article about economics. I don't know, Newsweek, something like that. And in reading that, I noticed how many words and phrases there are that we use to describe money and the behavior of money in our system that refer to money as if it were a liquid, as if it were water. And so you will hear the words, some of those words and phrases in this poem, and they occur in quotation marks, and I will indicate that with the universal sign for those things. Like, you know, you always see people do that, so that'll be the quote, right? Money is water. Cash flow, liquid assets, pooling our resources. It's clear that money falls from heaven. Drops and pennies, nickels, dimes, to gather in the small depressions of our hands. It's clear how profit swells and streams of money merge, how waves of money move through nations, cause a rippling effect, and soon recede. How some people drown, while others stay afloat and keep their heads above the flood. How banks are bailed out like wounded ships. Small investors find it hard to breathe. It's clear how money passes through our hands like water, and our sources, once dried up, leave us thirsting after more. How funds diverted often vanish, And those without a safety net go belly up. How all we have goes down the drain and we get soaked. From the second book, I guess this is a poem about when I was growing up in high school, and later on I realized that all these people, I grew up in a small town in Connecticut, and we were all just ordinary Americans there. I mean, just ordinary people. And I guess I thought that even then, we're just all ordinary people. And then I realized later on that these people have stayed in my mind all my life, that they're very important to me. That in fact they're more important than some famous people to me, because they're the people that helped you become who you are when you were younger. So this is a poem about that. It's called, I'm imagining here that there's a library of all these, of the books. You've heard this saying, there's a great book in everybody. Everybody has one great book in them that they can write. So that's what this poem is about. It's called In the Library of Unrecorded Lives. If there's one good book in everyone, as the saying goes, at least one, I like to think of Miss Shaughnessy, my third grade teacher, hair bunched back in a crimped bun, dress as drab as those gray afternoons spent dreaming in her class, eyes two magnified minnows behind glass thick as astronomical lenses. Could she have had a hidden life? Could she have dreamed of swashbucklers and maids, murder and sex merging in a narrative so gripping little boys would stop griping and fall silent under its spell? And what of Rosa Puckett, face pale as oatmeal, soft sack of silence we attacked like hornets, beleaguered figure of fourth grade fun? Could she have harbored romance, longed behind that shabby scowl for some exotic rendezvous on foreign sand? Or Tony Kenichi, block of meat, ham-fisted son of immigrants, could he have imagined heroes with a swagger, cloak and dagger exploits beyond the weekend pounding he withstood as the center on the football squad? What of their lives, and so many others God seemed loath to honor, nameless lumpen in the pageant of my own pubescent brain? Yet here they are, radiant in memory, each a star in the mind's incorruptible eye. Nero Legere, flashing horse teeth when he laughed, arms jutting out of tattered cuffs. Peggy Hood, so shy her feet scuffed circles when she spoke, butt of every joke we could muster, which only made her stammer worse. What of their lives, unrecorded in any book? I'd love to slip their volumes off the shelf and have a look. Settle in to read the wealth of life denied. Learn what Andy Washburn felt the night his ailing mother died, who coughed up 50 years of smoke and vanished. Or Cindy Fitz, banished on a withered leg, tall as a fence post and as lonely. Ordinary figures of disappointment and strife. If there's one good book in everyone, I'd love to browse those pages after years of currying my own regard. Lucent populations of the soul. It's for you I set down my life. So it's time for a sex poem. Don't get too excited. I don't think this will. It's called The Hots. And it's a word we used to, it's a phrase we used to use. So It's self-explanatory. The hots. I've got the hots for her. That's what we used to say. She's hot to trot, meaning long, sleek legs like a thoroughbred. I'm hot on her trail, hound and fox, meaning fox is dainty, fox is ladylike in lean pursuit. I've got the hots as if it were pox, a carnal plague that raised our blood and flushed our cheeks. The flames we imagined mirrored hell, that place the preacher advertised each week to cool our lust. She's hot stuff like lava or uranium, anything explosive and about to blow. Though what blew up was us. Teenage gauges topping out, rockets on a launch pad, sheathed in smoke, all systems go. Thank you. If you have to, you can clap. This is a poem. I wrote this quite a bit before 9/11, and it's about terrorism. And you know, it was already in the air that things were not so right. And this is addressed for you. It'll be addressed to the audience, but when you read it in the book, it's addressed to the reader of the poem. It's called "Dear Reader, I Mean No Harm." Dear reader, I mean no harm, but someone's out for your blood. Maybe it's personal. The friend of a boyfriend of an ex-lover who's heard what a dickhead you are and means to settle things. Maybe it's generic. Zealots from a neighboring tribe who happen to think you're God's the reason for their suffering. And what if pure chance, the certified crazy with a gun finding you among others, stampeding his rage? Whatever the case, beware. Someone's lying awake as you read this, sharpening his knife, dreaming of the sweet butter your throat would make. Someone's devising a small box, touching one thin wire to another, making the right connections to unnerve you. Eventually, hate sits down, ready to lay its scrupulous plans. And your name's mentioned more than once. This is not a theory. This is a poem, this next poem, it's sort of all over the page like that, because it's supposed to look like the constellations. I'm thinking about the constellations in heaven. And what I thought was, there's constellations we know like Orion or Taurus, Draco, Perseus, and Boades that I mentioned in here. These were all named by the ancient Greeks that long ago, and we still call them by those names, and we still see those figures in the sky. But I was thinking one night when I was looking at them, well, the stars are just up there. We could actually just rearrange it all if we really wanted to. We could just draw different figures. We could update it. We could make it modern. So this is called the Committee to Upgrade Celestial Signs. So you have to imagine this committee that's going to do this. The Committee to Upgrade Celestial Signs meets once a year to reevaluate old myths that spangle heaven. Taurus, Draco, Perseus, Boades, outdated in their Greek shining. Quickly renamed, they are reconfigured into modern shapes, cluster by cluster. Guitarist Major, double arches, Empire State Building, bottle of Coke. Each fall, the firmament glitters like a new marquee, a hit parade of celebrities to correspond with the season's upcoming shows. Where Cepheus glittered, the visage of an actress shines. Libra morphs into the body of a reigning hunk. The Pleiades burn all night, divas in a female rock group. Trained over centuries to forget the past, entire populations suffer from cultural amnesia catalyzed by constant change. This is now, a favorite bumper sticker shouts, and welcome to the interactive cosmos. Constellations rise and fall, brief as ads that flash across the blank screen of heaven. Computers work around the clock to thread stars into relevant patterns, while last year's icons fade like the memory of someone's face before cosmetic surgery. At last, the committee votes on current choices, having sifted through a copious printout of possible skies. Hands go up around the table as they nod and smile. With the stroke of a finger, the zodiac is realigned against the infinite blackness behind the stars. And this next poem, I think a lot about language and about words. You know, if you're a writer, you love words, and I think a lot about it. And I started to think about all these, most of you, lots of you, everyone in this room has read some Shakespeare, and there's all those great words that we don't use anymore. And you wonder, well, where did they go? You know, they're so great. So I got to thinking about, where do these words go? Where do words go once they fall out of use? And because every generation makes up neologisms, new words, right? Every generation makes up new words for itself that it can use. So I decided that, like anyone else, words went to retirement homes. So let's call it the retirement home for slang. At the retirement home for slang, they wander around in pajamas and robes, unkempt, malodorous, muttering to themselves, name tags askew on soiled flannel. Zounds, egads, shucks, hardly revealing the power of their former lives. And here in a corner sits Balderdash, lost in a leather chair, his walrus mustache breathing smoke and sputum and crumbs. While outside, Jiminy Crickets rests on the lawn, deciphering windrows of dead leaves. But just a few miles away near a small lake, camp neologism echoes with shouts. Far out and cool, pick sides. As rad and gnarly kick a hacky sack around. And awesome wanders in woods, discovering new fauna. Whoa and chill, paddle a canoe, shunning the rest, happy with their own devices. Such gaiety is lost in summer air, never finds its way across the lake as evening falls, shrouding boats at their moorings. Now, tush, tush, whispers to himself as hogwash is wheeled in, leaving only jeepers, singing softly in fading light. So I read this poem once to an audience, of high school students, and a young student came up to me at the end, and he said, Mr. Brown, those words, far out, rad, gnarly, they're old. Oh, my heart sank.
Hi, I'm Joe Perry. And Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, here for RAD. Recording artists, actors, and athletes against drunk driving. Never, never, never let someone you know get behind the wheel if they've been drinking. Friends don't let friends drive drunk.
There's something you should know about me. I'm cold. I'm calculating. I get what I want. If you get in my way, I'll wreak havoc upon you. I can leave you weak, limp, twisted, confused. If you want to live to see tomorrow, you answer to me, and you answer quickly. I am a stroke.
Learn to recognize a stroke and act quickly. Time lost is brain lost.
Okay, so I'm going to ask my wife to come up now, and we have translated some poems by a Flemish poet who writes in Dutch. And we're going to read a couple of those for you. And she will read the Flemish so you can hear what it sounds like. And anyone know Flemish in the room? Oh, good. And then I'll read the English translations.
So, somewhere in Europe, there's a very small country called Belgium. And because it was so tiny, like it's smaller than Maryland, they decided that it was going to be divided, you see, because people love to divide things. So they decided that they were going to divide Belgium, and the south of Belgium would speak French, and the north of Belgium would speak Dutch. Now, the Dutch became, with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, Flemish, which had its roots in Dutch, but also acquired some Gaelic, some Danish, some French, so it became a language in itself called Flemish. And I'm going to, I've got the wrong book in my hand, that's why I can't find the poem. I'm going to read the first poem in Flemish to you, and then Kurt will read our translation of it. And this poem is called Yonder in English, but Hinder, see, yonder, hinder, yonder, hinder has a little similitude, but not much. But I think you're going to understand a few things. I'm almost sure you're going to find that you understand a few words. Hinder. Ik zoek een dorp en daarin een huis en daarin een kamer waarin een bed. Bed. Okay, here we go. I won't start over except the last line. En daarin een kamer waarin een bed, waarin een vrouw. En in die vrouw een schoot. Buiten maakt de rivier zich breed om ver te gaan. De zilver geschubde, vissen hebbende, boten dragende, zee zoekende, hier blijvende. Zo zoekt een vergelijking een gedicht voor de nacht. Een man, een vrouw, een leeslind, een vouw, en nacht klapt het boek dicht. Boek. Okay.
That was nicer than the English. It's a poem called Yonder. I'm looking for a village, and in that, a house. And in that, a room where there's a bed, where there's a woman. And on that woman, lap. Outside, the river broadens to go farther. The silver-scaled, fish-rich, boat-carrying, sea-seeking, ever-remaining one. So, a comparison seeks a poem for the night. A man, a lover. A bookmark, a gutter. Night snaps the book shut.
And this is a poem that I like very much because it's about an old couple.
Yeah. Where is that?
Zijn 32. But we're better than this couple. It's very short. Zij en hij. Zij houdt moedig haar vrolijkheid op. En haar borsten. Ze heeft een humeur als een stevige BH. Ook hij is opgetrokken uit veel vrolijk ha. Maar zijn drift zit al jaren achter de tralies, de strepen van zijn pyjama.
Okay, so that's a poem called She and He. It's two four-line stanzas, short poem. She and he. She bravely holds her happiness up and her breasts. Her temper's wired like a bra. He's composed of joyful ha-has, but for years he's locked his passion behind bars, the stripes of his pajamas. I wanted to read one more poem to you, which is about writing. You know, when I was your age, I loved writing and I wanted to write, but also I love the idea, I love the thought of being a writer, and I thought being a writer would be some sort of, cultural hero. A writer was a really romantic thing to do. Now I find out that there are new heroes in our culture, and they write different things. And you're going to meet them in this poem as I met them. I was in Los Angeles walking down Sunset Strip and saw a hotel, and there was a big convention going on in that hotel, and there they were, all the new heroes. It's called convention.yahoo.com. Computer eggheads cluster at the bar, complex as circuitry, their chatter a static I can't understand. Name tags dangle like medals on Olympic stars. Conversation sparkles in the foyer, flows among tables spread with food. No one seems to relish. The future swaggers up in khaki slacks, cell phone clapped to one ear, laptop slung from a shoulder like an email man on the worldwide beat. They call themselves netizens and digerati, speak in raptures of a scalable web, while gizmos blossom in their palms called pilots, and buzzwords sizzle in their heads. Sexy girls in shorts and t-shirts prance around the lobby, yo hooligans blazoned on their breasts. They only glance at me, superannuated jerk, lone Luddite here. Yet here I am among the wired, geek of language on a page, slouching towards a night of writing in my room.
I'm Graham Rahal, a race car driver in the Champ Car World Series. Whether I'm reaching speeds of nearly 200 miles per hour on the racetrack or driving at home on the street, I always keep my hands on the wheel. Recent studies show that most crashes and near crashes involve some form of driver distraction. Please don't text while driving. The consequences can be very serious. Keep your hands on the wheel. Join me and my fellow drivers in the Champ Car World Series by taking the pledge at handsonthewheel.org.
When Suzanne introduced me, she was kind enough to say that I tend to observe, to just look at things. And so let me tell you right away, I am probably Belgium's and maybe America's biggest voyeur. And by that I mean that I'm obsessed by looking at people and discovering how they live, how they do it. You know, what is their story, and why do they wear pink and brown and turquoise, and why does it look good on them and not on me? And I mean, I'm perpetually curious. So I decided that most of the poems I'm going to read tonight are about me looking at people and my reaction to that. A very quick note to these creative writing students. The poems I'm going to read, which are about looking at people, you will hear that the last line of each poem becomes the first line of the next poem. These poems are all 14 lines, so they could be called sonnets. But then what I also like to do is that in the middle, because there are 14 lines, the 7th and 8th line, I repeat them also, but not exactly as I do the last line becoming the first line. So you're going to hear something, a repetition scheme going on, but I'm also going to explain some things to you so that you get some complications in here. She listens to music, eyes closed, hands joined, headset lost in thick black curls. A button on her jean jacket reads, "Still against the war." Next to her on the bus, a small boy frowns, mouthing something to his plastic police car. Now and then he looks up at an older woman who's been staring at them for a while. That's all I'll ever know about them. All I'll ever know is that we traveled a few blocks together and nothing happened. What thoughts they had, what the child mouthed, what music the woman listened to, insignificant, right? It was only me thinking the boy wanted to shoot that class bully from his police car. Or imagining the older woman was a racist and the other one a dreamer. What would you have seen? What would you have thought? What would you have seen? What would you have thought watching those two men crossing the Brooklyn Bridge, shrill shirts ballooning, trying to understand each other, hands swooping up the air like gulls? That the two poets gave each other wisdom or love or even a good time isn't the point. It's that no one crossing them on the bridge recognized them or stopped to watch Crane and Lorca walk by. Now, Crane and Lorca are two very famous poets. No one noticed Crane and Lorca walk by. They weren't stars, presidents, pitchers, or popes. Only two men standing with empty hands in the murmur of the river's mouth. The two greatest poetic geniuses alive meet, and what happens? What did they see? What did they talk about, feel, or think then, as around them the air, clouds, and waters went on, shuffling chance and light? Now, I'm going to say Czech. That means Czechoslovakian people. The Czech means the people living in Czechoslovakia. Kundera, Milan Kundera, is a fiction writer, a Czechoslovakian fiction writer. And I'm going to talk about a foreign word that I'm going to explain in the poem, and the word is lítost. I read that in an essay by this man called Milan Kundera, and it shocked me, and so I had to write a poem about it. So to repeat the last line of the preceding poem. Waters went on, shuffling chance and light, as the boy jumped into the river. He had come home from school that day with a drawing for his dad and found him overdosed on the couch. The Czech have a word for what drowned that boy, for what it is that guts a woman's belly long after an abortion. A word for what hurts exactly when a sheet is pulled over a child, a mother, or a soldier. In sheets pulled over a child or soldier, there is lítost. At the auction of his last tractor, lítost plows the farmer's heart. In bombs strapped to a terrorist's chest, or in the guns pointed at him, lítost. Kundera tells us it's untranslatable, that we have no word for this in English. But here's the point. What if we did? Would a word make such pain more tolerable? As if language could help. And here I'm speaking of Treblinka, which was a concentration camp during the Second World War in Europe. As if language could help her survive, the 10-year-old decides to invent a new language that won't have words for what she sees or fears, or who and what she must forget. Except for mother and father. Except for that, she will never speak or understand German again. She'll make new words up each day and repeat them, learn them by heart like songs. A new language, like songs, she'll keep singing to herself the way her parents did on the train that brought them here. But without words for home, Jew, or Treblinka. And she'll make up a new time also. No hours, no nights, no winters, only now and soon, so that when the train will come to take her home again with her parents, it'll be all at once, now and soon. And soon, sure enough, his wife's hand moves up his thigh to his groin, gently. 14 years of this, her incessant gentleness, and him trying to respond and failing again, or failing to find a better job, or be there for their son, or keep up with the mortgage. And now her hand moves away. She moves away from him, limp with failure, his forearm over his eyes. Would you recognize them? Standing in line at the bank, posing in a magazine, or smiling at you from home videos? Look, she holds the cake, he blows the candles, and waves at you, blowing kisses to the past, present, and future of what he fears most. Does anybody here know what a pantoum is? Okay, I'm not going to explain it to you. But it's a form. In this book, I was very interested in repetition, either of rhythm or sounds or whole lines. And this is a pantoum that has a very strict rule, where lines are repeated at a very precise place. You can't cheat, otherwise it's not a pantoum. So, I'll read you a pantoum that I wrote to a little girl that I lost at birth, called Stillbirth. Stillbirth. On a platform, I heard someone call out your name. No, Laetitia, no! It wasn't my train. The doors were closing, but I rushed in, searching for your face. But no, Laetitia, no. No one in that car could have been you, but I rushed in, searching for your face, no longer an infant, a woman now, blonde, 32. No one in that car could have been you. Laetitia Marie was the name I had chosen, no longer an infant, a woman now, blonde, 32. I sometimes go months without remembering you. Laetitia Marie was the name I had chosen. I was told not to look, not to get attached. I sometimes go months without remembering you. Some griefs bless us that way, not asking much space. I was told not to look, not to get attached. It wasn't my train. The doors were closing. Some griefs bless us that way, not asking much space. On a platform, I heard someone call out your name. And this is a poem, sometimes it happens to you when you expect it the least. I was waiting for a bus. It was sleet, cold, windy, awful, gray New York. And then I saw this very moving thing, and all I did was just write down what I saw. I don't think I have to explain anything else. It's the tragedy of divorce, and I thought it was just such a beautiful man. Anyway, this is called Bus Stop. Sullen, stubborn sleet all day. Traffic jammed on 6th. We crammed the shelter, soaked strangers, shivering, straining to see the bus, except for the man next to me, dialing his cell phone. He hunches, pulls his parka's collar over it, talks to it low and slow. It's Daddy, honey. You do? Me too. Ask Mommy if I can come see you. No? Oh. Okay. Sunday. Bye. Me too. Bye. He snaps the phone shut, holds it to his cheek, staring at nothing. Dusk stains the sleet, minutes slush by. When we board the bus, he's still pressing that phone to his cheek. 2 more poems. Thank you so much for coming. What a crowd. Did they pay you for this? I'm joking. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your attention. I can see you listening, if that makes any sense. Which is weird, isn't it? I can see you listening. I can see you listening. It makes no sense, does it? And still it does, doesn't it? Okay. This is called Birthday. Birthday. When winds wet their edges on the angles of roofs, and long mains of rain leave traces on my window, when the last leaves let go, have all let go, and it's almost winter again, don't remember my birthday. Give me another one. Let it be in May, sated and lit, the month my children were born, but not in November, gray gorged as the morning that I first gasped, unwelcomed by my parents. 40 years later, to the day I closed the casket on my father, his white mane slicked back, I almost stroked it. No one with me at the Antwerp crematory. My mother was too busy planning the funeral reception, and he had no family. Not a leaf was left on the cemetery oaks. Even the wind had nothing to hang on to, so it slapped the ashes into the rain that soaked the fur coat my mother had forced me to wear. Do it for me. Look like a lady for once. But no one was there to see me. Except for the funeral employees who wanted to get over it quick. Belgium was playing Germany at soccer that day. So, let's say I was born in the heart of May. Leaves alive with rain, oaks in the park freckling the benches with mellow shades. Send me a card then, or take me out to a sidewalk cafe and let's not talk too much. That'll be plenty. That'll be enough. And my last poem is called Night, and it's the last poem in the book. And if I sit at my writing table and I look through my little windows, there are 137 windows on the building across the street. And it's a poem about that. About imagining who's behind those windows and who's in this city and who's here. I mean, all your lives, you know. Night. Lights go off one by one in buildings across the street. There's something solemn about this. The lone drone of cars and cabs, an urban lullaby to shut windows. Pull the sheet over this day, subway driver, Torah reader, birthday girl, pimp. Pull the sheet, soldier's mother, corpse dresser, drunk man's bride. Sleep, my daughter. Sleep, my son, and sleep, Jeremiah Smith, the newborn he delivered in a charity ward today. Sleep. Wrap a wing around the orphan, the hungry woman, the caged man. Shut your eyes, face your walls, the scythe's blade is tilting toward the earth, so sleep for the one who knows horror or the one who dares speak in any God's name. Don't listen to the clockmaker, he's setting the alarm. Sleep until it rings, sleep toward the waking and the windowless night. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you very much, Susan.